Hi there, this is Kevin Patton with a brief introduction to episode 34 of the A&P Professor podcast, also known as TAPP Radio, an audio extravaganza for teachers of human anatomy and physiology. Well, here's what I have planned for episode 34. First, I'm going to talk about a free neuroscience workshop that is available this summer. I'm going to discuss ganglion cells in the retina of the eye, and the featured topic is actually divided into two parts, both of which have to do with dissection activities in the lab. The first part focuses on what I call the dissection list, which is going to help students as they perform the dissection during the lab session. And the second part focuses on a pre-dissection activity that makes the students' time in lab way more efficient than if they don't do the pre-dissection activity. But you'll find out more in episode 34. Regular listeners of this podcast know that I have not been doing these preview episodes for very long. And all along, I've been asking you whether I should keep doing them, whether they're helpful or not, and what you like about them, what you don't like about them, what suggestions you have to make them better. And my friend Mindi Fried recently tweeted me with some feedback that I want to share with you. She said in her tweet, "You asked about preview episodes, and to be honest, I have mixed feelings. I love the book recommendations that aren't in the regular episodes, as well as the word breakdown. Maybe have them shorter on what's coming up and more on the bonus content. Just my 2 cents. Well, Mindy, I think that's really good and very useful feedback, and I agree. I don't think I should be spending very much time on the topics because I don't really spend a whole lot of time on them in the full episode. So why rehash everything twice? So in the spirit of having it be just a preview, just a what's coming up notice, you'll notice that this time I really did just list the topics. I really didn't dive deep into what's going on or really describe them very fully at all because, well, that's what the full episode is for. So let me know how you like them, Mindy, and everybody else. Do you like them shorter like that, or do you not like them shorter like that? And I'd sure love to have some more input on what you don't like and what you do like, and maybe some ideas for different kinds of bonus content that I can put into the preview, or maybe some regular feature of the full episode that you'd like to see on a more regular basis. By the way, did you know that the 1-year anniversary of the first episode of the A&P Professor podcast is coming up in late January? That's right around the corner. I can't believe it's been a year already. And being as most of us are now on winter break, it might not be a bad idea to, have a binge listen to the entire year's worth of episodes right now. While you're laying on a beach somewhere, sipping cold iced tea and really missing being in the classroom. And now might be a really great time to finally call into the podcast hotline with that question or comment that you've been meaning to pass along. Or maybe you have something you want to share with other A&P teachers. A teaching tip, a favorite demonstration, a helpful clarification or update on a concept, a favorite resource. Or maybe you know of someone you'd like to hear from on the podcast. Well, it's really, really easy. Just email me at podcast@theapprofessor.org, or better yet, call into the podcast hotline at 1-833-546-6336. That's 1-833-LION-DEN. By the way, when you call, you'll have the option to ring my phone and speak to me directly, or leave a private voicemail, or record a message for the podcast hotline. It's all very modern. There's even some of that soothing telephone music while you wait to be connected. Well, as usual, I have a few words to dissect, and the first term is a a fun one to say. Suprachiasmatic Nucleus, otherwise known as the SCN. Isn't that fun to say, suprachiasmatic? I mean, that's almost as much fun as carbaminohemoglobin or endoplasmic reticulum. Anyway, suprachiasmatic means, well, let's break it apart. The first word part is supra, which means above or over. The second word part is chi, C-H-I, and that comes from the Greek letter chi, which looks like our letter X. It's the equivalent to our letter X. And chi is often used to represent an X shape, that is, crossed lines. And in this case, it refers to where the optic tracts and nerves cross over one another and form an X-shaped structure that is inferior to the floor of the hypothalamus. And then the asthma that comes after chi, that is what's sometimes called a noun suffix. And what that means is it's a suffix that is to designate that the term is a noun or a thing. So we can, literally translate asthma as thing. And then the T that comes after asthma doesn't mean anything. It's just a combining letter. And then the term ends with IC, ick, which means relating to. So if we put it all together, suprachiasmatic means relating to something that is above, or in this case, superior to, where the optic nerves cross over and form that X. And then the second part of the term is nucleus, suprachiasmatic nucleus. And nucleus literally means kernel or core of something. And we see that used a lot in biology, right? In the nucleus of an atom, in the nucleus of a cell. And when we get to nerve tissue, we usually use the term nucleus to refer to an area where we have a chunk of gray matter, usually operating as some sort of regulatory center. So the suprachiasmatic nucleus is one of these gray matter areas, one of these regulatory centers that is just above where the optic nerves and optic tracts cross over and form that X-shaped structure. And in fact, that is exactly where it is in the inferior floor of the hypothalamus. Another term I want to dissect is melanopsin. And melon, that part, M-E-L-A-N, literally means black, but it refers to really any black or dark brown color. And then ops, O-P-S, means vision, and then that I-N ending at the end of the term means substance and is often used to designate a protein. So melanopsin is a protein that is dark, black, or brownish, and it relates to vision. It's one of the visual pigments, sort of like rhodopsin or photopsin, which I'll get back to in a moment. But let's focus on melanopsin. Melanopsin is called that because it is dark brown. And it was discovered in these little dark brown spots called melanophores that are in the skin of African clawed frogs. And these are light-sensitive skin cells. And that was discovered in 1998. And then the following year, 1999, they found that same melanopsin in the mammalian retina. And then in 2000, the year after that, that is, they discovered where they were in the retina. They're in the ganglion cells, which, remember, are connected to the rods and cones. They were at that time recognized as detecting light, but not for vision as much for being involved in circadian mechanisms. And that whole process is still being worked out, but it goes back quite a ways. And of course, the term melanopsin relates to the other visual pigments that we see in the retina, such as rhodopsin, which is found in the rods. And there, it's kind of a pinkish pigment, although sometimes it's called visual purple. But that, if you break that word down, that rhodo part comes from a word that literally means rose or rose-colored. So that makes sense, right? And then photopsin, is found in the cones. And you may know that there are three different types 1, 2, and 3, which makes sense for the three different types of cones, which are often called red, green, and blue cones. So that's Melanopsin. And the third term that I want to break down is one I just mentioned a moment ago, and that is circadian. And if you break that down, the circa part means around or cycle, and then the dia part means day, and then the an ending means relating to. So circadian means relating to the cycle of a day or going around a day. And it usually refers to, or most precisely refers to, our daily biological cycles. But it can be used more broadly to refer to time cycles in general, including those that are maybe a cycle that's longer than a day or shorter than a day, although precisely it refers to a daily cycle. So there's our word dissections for this preview episode. This preview podcast is sponsored by HAPS, the Human Anatomy and Physiology Society, promoting excellence in the teaching of human anatomy and physiology for over 30 years. Go visit HAPS at theapprofessor.org/HAPS. That's HAPS. This winter break, I've been reading a book called The Physician by Noah Gordon. And so I'm going to recommend that for the A&P Professor Book Club because I think a lot of A&P professors would be interested in reading it, especially if you like historical fiction that also relates to what we do in human anatomy and physiology. And just to give you a brief introduction to it, it centers on a character named Rob Cole, who was born in London early in the 11th century during what's often called the Dark Ages in Europe. And at about 9 years old, he's orphaned and then indentured to a barber-surgeon and becomes his apprentice. During his apprenticeship, he realizes that it's the physicians rather than the barber-surgeons who know most about how the human body is structured and how it works, and more importantly, how healing works and what we can do to promote healing and wellness. And so after his apprenticeship is over and then his master dies, he takes over the business and eventually travels to Persia because he wants to become a physician. And Persia is the only place during those days where the only authentic medical schools were found. And so he studies with a person called Avicenna or Ibn Sina, who was an actual real person who ran a medical school in Persia at that time. So I said it's historical fiction. So this guy is used fictionally here, but based on a real person. And he was a very famous Persian physician and philosopher during what is often called the Islamic Golden Age, where we were really making great strides in understanding human anatomy and physiology and medicine. It's really been a very fascinating look at what was going on at that time in that place, which, having been raised and educated in the West, I honestly don't know that much about. And it's really very interesting to me to see what was going on there that was not going on at that time in Europe. It only was much later during what's often called the Renaissance in Europe that we started to make that kind of progress. So very interesting book so far. I really recommend it. And you can go to the approfessor.org to the book club or click on the link in the show notes or the episode page to see more about this book called The Physician by Noah Gordon. A searchable transcript and a captioned audiogram of this preview episode are funded by AAA, the American Association of Anatomists, at anatomy.org. Well, this is Kevin Patton signing off until our next episode and reminding you to keep your questions and comments coming. why not call the podcast hotline right now at 1-833-LION-DEN. That's 1-833-546-6336. Or visit us at theapprofessor.org. See you next time.